Good afternoon. I'm Jenna Talbot from Whiteboard Advisors. We are just about ready to get started here. We'll give everyone just a few minutes to cycle in, and then we'll hand it over to Dave Clayton, who will kick us off. So thanks for joining us. And for those just chiming in, we are just giving everyone about another 30 seconds or so to join the room, and then we'll get started with this afternoon's webinar. All right, Dave, why don't we hand it over to you?
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you for those of you who are joining with us today and your time and interest. Particularly appreciative for those who joined us as panelists today with Chigo Egbune, who is a recent graduate of the Community College of Denver, and he'll be starting at Colorado State University one way or another this fall. But Chigo's also, for the past 4 years, been working in the Office of College and Career Readiness for Denver Public Schools. So he'll bring a great perspective of his own lived experience, but also helping his peers and others navigate these transitions that we'll be talking about of pursuing post-secondary education. So thank you to Chigo, and grateful to have Dr. Paul Dosal, who's the Vice President of Student Success at the University of South Florida, and Sarah Horn, who's a co-founder and principal with ReUp Education. I think as I've reflected, Paul and Sarah's remarkable ability to focus on individuals while organizing systems that serve individuals at the same time is striking. And as we visited yesterday together in preparation, just very eager for them to be able to share their perspectives with all of us. We have some findings. As you know, we have an ongoing research perspective, and my colleague, Dr. Nicole Torpey-Sabo, will walk us through the most recent analyses, but maybe I'll just provide a little context as we move forward today. We're actually bringing together three research projects today. The Public Viewpoint is a weekly recurring March through June, now every 2 weeks through the end of October as we move into this next transition phase for the nation and for higher education. It's nationally representative. That means that the results you will see are representative of the American public. And Nicole sometimes is looking at workers, and sometimes looking at people ages 18 to 65, and sometimes looking at adults who don't have a college degree or credential, and she'll be clear about that. But just understand that what we're sharing does represent the nation with regard to the age of individuals, their gender, their educational attainment, their race and ethnicity, and the geographic regions in which they live. We're also going to share with you for the first time just some new data that we received back through our ongoing partnership with Gallup in the Strata Gallup Education Consumer Survey. 10,000 American adults have answered questions about their interest in education and perspectives and motivations that we'll be looking at today. And then last fall, end of last summer, last fall, Nicole and I and others on our team we spoke to a representative sample of adults who said they were actively considering or planning pursuing additional education, adults who did not have post-secondary degrees and credentials, to really understand their thinking, their barriers, their motivations, their aspirations. And that's just so relevant still to this decision-making that we'll see. So Nicole will help us understand those three pieces of work as they come together and as we have this discussion today about motivations, barriers, and expectations that the American public have about post-secondary education and training. Thank you, Nicole. You can find on our website, and some of you have been following along, that this is actually the 11th webinar, 11th data release. And so we have archived on the webinar other topics and looking at different demographic groups and themes. And so please look to those if you see things today that you'd like more detail or have curiosity about, as well as letting us know. there have always been barriers and challenges to navigate in our society when it comes to pursuing post-secondary education. And certainly the pandemic and the challenges we're confronting are not making that any easier for people. It's added to it. And so we wanted to look at, in the current state, what are people experiencing? That Strata Gallup survey has taken place this spring. The public viewpoint has taken place this spring and into summer. So how are people feeling right now, and what are they looking to for education, and what are they expecting? Next slide. It's remarkable to me, not necessarily in trying to forecast enrollment numbers, though you'd all like it if anybody could with certainty at this point. I know you're doing that yourselves on campuses, many of you. But for 25% of American adults who are not currently enrolled, adults ages 18 to 65, to say, I'm likely to pursue more education or training in the next 6 months, and for that to go up a little above 50% if you open up that horizon to 5 years, just speaks to the belief that Americans have in the importance of education in their lives and the value they have. And so there's a real emotional, deep-seated belief and commitment to education that is there. We'll see, I think, as Nicole shares some of the data, that those challenges are not about believing whether it's good to exercise more or to eat more fruits and vegetables or to get better sleep, or those things we believe are good for us in widespread ways, but more in the confidence that they have about their individual ability to pursue and succeed, and in the outcomes that they aspire for as we work to meet their needs. Specifically looking at their needs, when we ask if you're going to enroll in the next 6 months, hypothetically, broad brushstrokes, adults, what would you be seeking? What would be your goal? And again, we see this 63% are talking about non-degree credentials, skills, and programs and opportunities, as opposed to then the balance of individuals looking at a traditional degree pursuit. So with that, I think 3 kind of key questions that Nicole is going to look at in more detail. What are the motivations? If 25% are ready to go in the next 6 months or express a likelihood to, why? What are they seeking? What do they see as the challenges and barriers? And then what do they expect? How will it go, and what will the outcomes be from their perspective? Some of us are so close to it so often to understand those who are contemplating these choices, how they're viewing it. So thank you, Nicole, and we'll go to there. And as you have questions along the way, as Nicole's speaking, please feel free to push those into the Q&A function. Jenna is going to come back and help moderate a discussion with our panelists, and an important part of that are your questions as an audience. So thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Dave. So the first section we're going to talk about is motivations. And when we're trying to understand whether people are likely to pursue education, we first have to understand what is motivating them to do so. And I'm really looking forward to hearing firsthand from our panelists on this as well. So the 2 key points just to preview in this section that I see are that there are many different motivations that can cause people to seek education and training. But at the same time, the career motivation and the ability to see that education is going to impact their career tends to be right at the top. So here we ask people who had gotten a degree, why were you motivated? You know, what was the reason that you personally decided to pursue that level of education? And as I said, you can see that there are a lot of different reasons. People want to learn new things and be a good role model, but right up there at the top, the most important reasons that we really can't ignore are those career motivations. So people want to gain the right skills and qualify for good jobs and advance their careers. That's really mirrored here when we ask kind of the flip question for people who say they're not interested in enrolling. So people who under no circumstances want to enroll in education, the top reason they say is because they don't see a real benefit at work. You can see that 42%. It's a lot higher than any of these other reasons. So that's kind of the floor, that's the foundation. The next section will be talking about the barriers, but we needed to start here to see, you know, if you can't get past seeing the payoff or the benefit, then you're never even going to motivate someone to consider the possibility. At the same time, we know that even if someone is really motivated, there are all kinds of barriers. And as Dave mentioned, you know, a lot of them have really been exacerbated by the pandemic. So this is what we're going to talk about in the next section, is what are the other challenges that are keeping people from enrolling. So we asked people about a variety of challenges that they would face in pursuing additional education or training. And this is the percent of people who said that these challenges would be extremely or very challenging to them. So takeaways here, you can see that the largest challenge here has to do with time and logistical barriers. And I'll get into that more on the following slide. There's a number of different items that go under that. Secondly, right up there with cost, which we already know cost is so important, was actually self-doubt. And so this is something that maybe isn't talked about as much. You know, we talk about policies to defray the cost of education or to make it accessible in terms of times that courses are available. But there are a lot of kind of emotional and other types of barriers for people. And so we'll get into that a little bit more as well. Then third, you see cost. We all know that's so important. And then down at the bottom, these challenges are things that you'd see in normal times, but are even more exacerbated right now, I think, with COVID, is people having concerns about their health or concerns about whether they have the right access to technology. You see about a third of people saying that those are extremely or very challenging. So looking specifically into some of those time and logistical challenges, these are all the different items that we offered for people. And you can see at the top there's time away from work or balancing school and work were very challenging for more than a third of people. Balancing school and childcare, a little more than a quarter of people said that would be very or extremely challenging. And then 55% of people said at least one of these would be very or extremely challenging for them. So again, that was our top barrier that we found. We also know that these are overlapping. A lot of people face multiple time and logistical barriers. So you see 55% had at least one, but then almost 40% had at least two, about a quarter had at least three of these challenges. So even if you can solve for one, you know that a lot of these challenges are overlapping in people's lives. So next, I want to look closer at the finding we had on self-doubt, because I think that's an important thing that we'll probably be getting into in the discussion. And so we see almost half of people said that it would be extremely or very challenging in pursuing education and training, either the fear that they wouldn't be able to succeed or the fear that they'd been out of school for too long. And it's interesting, I looked at this across age groups and it was actually pretty similar. So even some of the younger students at 18 to 24, even in that group, you had quite a few people who are afraid they'd been out of school too long already. And, a lot of people in both age groups really being afraid that they wouldn't be able to succeed. So how can institutions look at that barrier in the same way that they're looking at costs or scheduling or things like that? And the only other thing that I want to note on this one is this was all American adults, but if you look specifically at people who don't have a post-secondary degree or credential, don't have that college experience, this is even higher. So you have about 55% of people who don't have any of that post-secondary experience saying that these barriers are very or extremely challenging. The last one I want to go into is that access to technology. And so we asked people about if they had challenges with reliable access to internet or computers. And we found some real disparities here. So we found that Latinos and Black Americans were much more likely to say that these were very or extremely challenging for them. And we also found that people living in urban areas were the most likely to say that this kind of access was challenging, which I think, was maybe a little surprising or unexpected. There's been a lot of talk about, broadband access and infrastructure and things like that. But I think this is highlighting that it's not only about having cell towers built or, having that infrastructure, but whether people actually have access to these things in their homes now that it's more challenging to access internet or computers maybe in public places due to health risks and the pandemic. So then the last section, I want to talk about expectations. And so this is specifically focusing on Americans without degrees and how they're assessing that kind of cost benefit of getting education. Do they expect it to be worth it? And do they have a good understanding of what it actually takes to complete that education? So the first thing you see, we ask people to look back at how interested they were in getting more education at the time they left high school. So these are people who never went on to get a degree or credential, but we see that more than 40% said that they were very or extremely interested in pursuing additional education when they left high school. If you include the somewhat interested, you have over 70% of this group saying that they were interested in more education. So the question is, they didn't go on to complete. Why not? What stopped them? One of the reasons could be that they just didn't have a good understanding of how to make that aspiration into a reality. So we asked them whether they had a good understanding, for example, of options for paying for education, and only about a third of this group said that they did. They had a good understanding. We know that a lot of this group that doesn't have degrees and credentials don't have parents who had degrees or credentials. And so a lot of this, they don't have anyone to go to for that kind of advice and information. But the other thing is that this kind of lack of understanding of how the system works, it persists. It's not just for high school seniors coming out and not really understanding. So this is where we compared the results with our survey of adults who were considering enrolling in an education. And what we found here was a lot of misperceptions. So what we have on the left of each of these little squares here is the estimation of this group in terms of either time or cost. And then on the right side, you have what the actual average time to complete or the average cost to complete is. So you can see that in every case, their estimates are too low. They're underestimating how long it's going to take them to complete a degree, and they're underestimating the cost, particularly if you look in that bottom right-hand corner for that bachelor's degree. People thought that it would cost them about $33,000 when we know that if you take the average annual cost and multiply it by that 5.1 years that it usually takes people instead of 4, that you're looking at over 100,000. Now that varies widely. Of course, that's one of the issues that maybe Sarah will speak to later, is just there's not a lot of clear information necessarily around what college costs and what each individual is going to pay for it, because it's so unique and different depending on the institution and depending on the particular financial aid package. But I think we see that people, they really don't have a good idea of how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take them. So people are unsure about the time and the costs. We saw earlier that they're unsure about their own ability to succeed. And then circling back to the theme that we first started on, we also see that they're unsure about the value that they're going to get from that education. So we asked, if you were to go on for additional education, would it advance your career, be worth the cost, or help you get a stable job in times of economic uncertainty? And you see it's about 50-50, especially for those bottom two indicators. So, on the one hand, people are hopeful, but there's not a strong confidence or a strong consensus. And so, there's still a lot of doubts, I think, about whether that education is going to be worth it and whether it's going to give them the career value that they would need to see in order to have that confidence to enroll. So that's just kind of a summary of this week's findings. Americans are looking for that clear career benefit in order to enroll. We see a number of different challenges that I talked through, and then our panel will discuss more. And again, we know that people that are considering enrolling often don't have a good picture of the time and the costs involved. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and turn it back over to Jenna and our panelists.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. Before we get started with the panelists, just a reminder, you can pop your questions into the Q&A We'll try to get to as many as possible. The research team is standing by. If you have methodological questions, you can definitely put those in there. They'll get to them via text, and then we'll try with the group to answer as many as possible. So go ahead and start using that functionality. But let's start out, Paul. When we spoke earlier, and we were just kind of walking through the findings, you called the self-doubt as a barrier to be a significant finding. Can you talk through what struck you about that, and how do you think higher ed institutions can address that barrier?
Sure, Jenna. When I saw the results, I was expecting to see financial barriers or even the logistics, but to see self-doubt ranked so highly was a surprise to me. And I think that means those of us in higher ed need to be prepared for that. And we need to address it in the recruitment process and the onboarding process, but also make sure that when they're enrolled, that we have the counseling services and perhaps student success coaches ready to provide the support those students need when they need it. And so it's also very important for us to recognize that those students who come in with some self-doubts may not always ask for help when they need it. So it's very important that we also utilize predictive analytics, early warning systems, and technology to make sure that we connect our network of providers in a way that allows them to intervene in a timely way to provide that kind of support to the students when they need it, before the problems might escalate. It reinforces the importance of a holistic approach to student success, that we need to think about their emotional well-being as well as all the other factors that lead to the success of a student and their timely graduation. So I'm grateful to see that in the findings.
Well, thanks. And Paul, I'm going to get back to you on the holistic advising piece, and would love for you to share with the group today a little bit more about the case management, model that you've put in place. Because I think thinking about cost, time and logistics, and the kind of emotional component, you guys have already been thinking about this. So we'll come back to you in a minute on that. Sarah, ReUp has recently launched a network. You've got about 13 colleges coming together that are really trying to ease some of the points of friction for students looking to return to college. I'd love for you to share a little bit of that, but also let's talk about what are some of the biggest motivations for returning to college. And as you are helping counsel students and help them decide, what are the right programs, institutions, what are the questions that they really need answered as they weigh re-enrollment?
Yeah, thanks. First, I couldn't agree more with Paul about what he's saying, around the unique nuances around what students want and need, both as they're looking towards re-enrolling and also as they go on to earn their degree for years and years and years. Our partners have been really innovative in trying to better understand how to meet the needs of learners that have some college credit and no degree, but ultimately want to get their credential. And so, we've been working on a pathway where we can meet the needs of 100% of learners, whether they want to go back to their original institution or actually transfer and find a better fit within a network. That's what we've built. To answer your network question, what we find is that the driving force for stopped out learners is typically a very intrinsic motivation. So people want to finish what they started. They ultimately want to complete this goal that they had years ago. And there are secondary extrinsic motivations, like I want to make more money, or I want to ultimately have a better job. But the real driving force is I want to make a better life for my family. I want to be a great example for my kids and show them that this can actually be done. But when push comes to shove, while those are the major motivators, there are very practical questions that students have that they want to have answered pretty early on. In fact, very early on in the process. Learners want to know, well, how many credits did I already earn? How many do I have left? And what does that mean in terms of how long it's going to take me to complete? And the flip side of that, how quickly can I complete? So what are the range of options that I have? And then finally, students want to know, what is it going to cost me? And what we've been working on with our partners in and out of the network. And what we know to be true is that the faster and the more accurately our institutions can help learners understand and get answers to those questions, actually, the more motivating it can be to think about going back to college, because it makes it feel like, and it's showing that there's sort of less friction to get answers and there's a seamless path to go back.
Thank you. Chigo, first of all, I know you're calling in from a coffee shop because internet was not being nice in your household. So I appreciate you making the time and being committed to join us. Just tell, Dave alluded a little bit to your pathway. You've just finished up at your community college, you're headed to Colorado State, but tell us a little bit about your background. What's motivating you to get your degree?
Thank you. First thing I want to say is I want to thank you guys for having me here. It's not every day that a kid from Northeast Park Hill gets to, talk in front of 350 people about the disparities and all this stuff about the community. So I'm really eager to be here in this position and talk to you guys. And to answer your question about my trajectory, I guess, I really wasn't always the best student. Like you said, I work currently for DPS and I'm moving on to CSU. I haven't always been that way. When I first started, high school and stuff like that, I struggled with a lot of gang and drug violence and stuff like that because just the area that I lived in didn't have very much opportunity. For a while, I just kind of didn't find the need in school. I kind of thought math and English and other basic things like that were just kind of useless because I was more worried about how I was going to eat lunch and stuff like that. And I just thought it was more cool to have kind of money in your pocket than to kind of be in class and focus on those things. It wasn't until actually I met Nicole Torby-Sabo's husband, Joe, that I really started to, focus up on a lot of the things that, that we're talking about today that kind of make life better. I worked with DPS Career Connect as an intern for about 2 years, just really realizing why it's important to have degrees. And not even the skills that they teach you in class, it's just kind of the degree itself I kind of identified why it was important working with the Career Connect team and all that stuff. And then even more so, I kind of learned what it really took to be a leader. I learned leadership skills, and I also kind of figured out that the stuff that I was doing on the streets was never going to make me the type of money or the type of connections that I was making just kind of sitting here being an intern working for like $1,100 over a summer. So it was the first summer that I worked with them, it was really interesting. It kind of changed my whole school trajectory. I started focusing a lot more in school. But then after that school year, I saw barriers with people, like the people that I grew up with. They kind of saw me as like a traitor or a jump shipper because I started focusing on different things. It's really hard to go from gang banging to educational schoolwork. As I'm sure a lot of you guys know, it's not accepted, you seem different. So, when I was 16, there was 56 people that died. Then this is just the homicides. And honestly, I knew 2 of them and personally, and then 4 of them were like brothers and fathers of my personal friends. So the reality of the situation is even today, I'm still healing from stuff that I don't really talk about in person. So to see some of this data and all this stuff that you guys are talking about, it really kind of makes me happy to see that this conversation is really happening. And a lot of people are doing this research because it's hard, like me even going to college, like when I started CSU, I probably wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for Joe, really, because I was dealing with a lot of stuff. The Career Connect stuff was hard as it was, and I was dealing with relationships and school. I'm not gonna drag on about that, but it was ridiculous trying to figure out everything. And now that I did, I'm really proud. And, even last year I lost a friend and I'm still kind of just healing from that. And that's kind of one of the biggest things. I see all the data that you guys talk about with self-doubt. And I think it's like, you don't have role models and you don't have people to kind of talk to about and it's not just like, general role models. You don't have like a friend to kind of just sit down and say, man, this school is really killing you. And even if you did, they don't understand, or they're going to tell you something that's like, kind of all over the place. And my past has really drugged me down a lot, but I've overcome it. So it's been great. It's kind of what my growth has been great. I've gone from doing a lot of stuff that I wish I didn't do to doing amazing stuff now. And now I'm moving forward to kind of working in CSU, and I love that you guys are doing all this work to kind of just make it easier for other students, because I know that, you know, if it wasn't for the people that I had in my community that kind of just pushed me forward, I wouldn't be here today, you know. So there's that.
Well, thank you for sharing with us. We're going to come back to you in a minute, because I think more than anything, you know, Strata's work has all been about emphasizing and bringing to light the perspectives of individuals that are going through the education system. And so I think we're all going to be eager to hear some of your own advice for those of us working in education, how we can smooth some of those barriers and challenges. So I'm going to come back to you in just a second, but thank you for taking the time and being so honest and sharing what your experience has been like. So Paul, I mean, right there, Chigo's talking through just some of the barriers of even getting to college, right? We know that there's also the navigation challenge. Students face, of all backgrounds, are facing challenges in navigating how they get from point A to point B. USF's really been on the forefront as we think about student success. I've been paying attention to your institution for a number of years. Can you talk through, you know, how do you think about the right kinds of supports for students, particularly in this environment, as they're either returning for the first time to school or just returning from pretty rocky semester last semester? You know, how are you thinking about supporting students right now?
Well, what Chigo just described for us are real barriers to the success of our students in higher ed. And we need to address these. And to do that, first and foremost, it's important that the institution create a culture of care on our campus. That is, everybody, faculty, students, staff, everybody needs to care about the well-being and success of our students. That's why we're here. Without that culture of care, it doesn't matter what fancy new technologies we deploy. If we're not ready to use them to help out our students, it doesn't matter. And so that has been our main focus in our student success movement at USF for the past 10 years. Let's create this culture where it matters, and we can help out students like Chigo along the journey. We believe at USF that every one of our 50,000 students will succeed. If we admit them, they're going to make it. But we also expect that each one of them from time to time will also come across certain barriers. And those barriers might include emotional considerations. They might enter into a class that's the first real challenge for them. And we need to have a network of care providers who are prepared to intervene in a timely way in order to support that student. And so students like Chigo, while those are very real barriers, we also have to recognize come into the university with certain assets as well. It's the perseverance and the determination to make it that are very real assets on the journey to a degree. And our care providers need to recognize that, use that, appeal to that, because we can offer timely support along the way if we put in place all the other elements that are necessary. And those are going to include the predictive analytics platforms and the technology pieces that help us make a campus or 3 campuses at USF with 50,000 students. If we don't have those elements in place, how can we possibly deliver individualized support to students? But we can do this. We can operate at scale and identify individual students in real time and help them when they need our help. And the survey results today indicate some of the areas where we need to step in and level the playing field. There's clearly a digital divide that's shown in the research results. Hispanic and Black, Latino, and Black students, they don't have access to reliable internet in the same way other students do. We need to address that. We need to level the playing field, particularly in this virtual environment we're operating in now, to make sure every student has the opportunity to succeed as the others do. And so I think we can do that, provided that we create that culture of care. That's the prerequisite for everything that we do in higher ed.
Thanks, Paul. Chigo, I'm not sure if we lost you with video. I might ask Sarah a question and then come back. Oh, there you are. Okay, let's ask you another question here. I'm curious, Chigo, what has been your experience this past fall or this past spring, finishing up at the community college and then getting ready to transfer? Describe your experience a little bit. Have there been things that the schools have done both on the community college side and Colorado State that have made it easier as you've made that transition?
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is admissions department at Colorado State University is legendary, as well as the financial aid department. This person that I've been working with, Kevin Winchell, he's been like a one-stop shop to help me with my financial aid, because when I first got accepted to CSU, I had no clue how I was going to actually pay for it, because it's actually, because of all the amazing things that I've done with concurrent enrollment, I got the first 2 years of my bachelor's degree paid for, and I went to CCD for that. And that was amazing. But the rest of the two is like $28,000, and I don't have even one to pay. So it was really, Kevin was amazing. He helped me apply for, along with Joe, my DSF, my first generation, all of that stuff to get through. And this is like someone that works at the admissions department, full caseload of people that he has to work with. Literally sat down. If I emailed him right now, he would email me back and within like 10 minutes to help me out with stuff. And so that's been amazing over there. The people in those apartments have been really helpful. I've met a lot of students too that have been grateful, that have been really helpful. And CCD's community has been amazing. Every teacher that I've met and every student that I've met is so diverse to go to CCD. It's really great. And just fun. Graduating from there, I know COVID has really knocked off my graduation thing. I've transferred a lot of schools, so when I graduated from high school, it didn't really feel like, a real graduation because none of my friends were really there. But graduating from CCD, I was really excited for it because I really felt like I built a family, with the teachers and everything like that you're supposed to do. So that was really fun. COVID kind of put a wrench in that, as all of you are sure, but it's been great. And then just with life, like with COVID and the protests and everything that's been going on, it's been really hard to focus. I also work with DPS Career Connect, as you guys said. I focus on sending interns to a lot of companies. Because of COVID-19, a lot of those internships have just kind of like disappeared. So we've been scrambling to find different avenues for online internships and stuff like that. And I've been successful in finding some companies, some photography companies to take interns, but it's just not as big as it was before. So I've been struggling on the work side to kind of just manage that. My manager has been extremely stressed out, just trying to, maintain a program that's like it's a face-to-face internship program, and companies are struggling to feed their bottom line because of COVID. So we're navigating a delicate brand with all of that.
Yeah, so you're seeing all aspects of the challenges that are popping up here. Well, we're going to get back to you. I know I'm just watching the chat blow up with excitement around your remarks. So we'll come back to you in a little bit for some advice. But I think your point around being accepted to Colorado State and not knowing how you were going to pay for it, that shows up in the data today too, with individuals just being unsure of how long it takes to move through school and what it's really going to cost. And another interesting finding we see here is, really that a lot of adults without degrees, so presumably some who have stopped out and some just who have never even given it a thought, are really asking this question of, is it worth it? And Sarah, I'm curious from your perspective, talking to especially adult learners who are already working and trying to figure out, is it worth the time and investment? How can higher ed best learn from the perspectives of consumers who are questioning it, and in turn design and communicate the value of a post-secondary degree?
Yeah, it's a great, huge question. First, what I see, and perhaps other panelists see as well, is we have to distinguish and make a distinction between cost, which is a flat dollar amount, and a sticker price, so to speak, and value. And the value and cost are not the same things. Value is much broader, and frankly, it's very personalized. Each individual student and learner, whether they're current or prospective, how they define the value of going back to school or being in school, there's never going to be the same answer from any student to student, right? And I think what we have to do as an industry is take into consideration and have kind of better tools and processes to understand the value equation for students, and not just in a cookie cutter way, but in a very personalized way. So taking into account, what is your motivation for getting started in the first place? What do you hope this degree or credential will do for you, for your family? What are the barriers for you to be able to start or continue? And those, we have to take that inventory and get that information, not just once, but that has to continue to be recorded and understood over time, so that our proactive student care and coaching and responses are personalized, not just for each individual student based on one moment of time, but over the course of their entire student life cycle. As we saw from the data, you know, your students are going to be on this journey for years. Motivations, barriers, challenges are going to change. We're hearing that from Chigo's story, right? What Chigo thought this was going to look like, and the challenges that he had on day one are not the same ones that you're facing today. And I think our responsibility is higher education, our educators and student supports, to come up with ways, like Paul said, to really understand at scale, how can we use what our students want and what they need to respond in proactive and personalized ways that will keep them on a journey to ultimately get what they want and get the value that they expected to have when they started in the first place.
Thanks, Sarah, and maybe I'll just jump in with your, if we look exclusively at the ROI of, the wages earned with those who have degrees and those who don't, I agree that it's too narrow of a definition of what value is. And our research and body of work shows that an education major places greater value on their degree than a computer science major. Right? And that's not about wages alone. It's about fulfillment and security and feeling like you've found your talent and your ability to give and contribute and be successful. And so I think that's just, and one of you, Alexis Buckdom, a participant, put in a chat this notion, as Paul was speaking, of student-ready campus versus college-ready student, or education and training that fits into the lives of individuals rather than individuals that have to fit their lives into an education and training system. And that's really been our whole impetus with Strata, is to bring forward, Chigo is one voice, and Sarah has worked with tens of thousands, and Paul has worked with hundreds of thousands. And in speaking to that, how do we all see the individuals and find ways to help them transform their lives in the way Chigo is doing, and all of us are doing in different times and moments through time. But appreciate those comments about value and trying to help us focus on serving others first, and then that will work to the betterment of all of us.
Thanks, Dave. Well, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to save some of the other questions I had just to make sure we get to hear from everyone else. So I'm going to jump right into our Q&A. The first one, Chigo, is for you. So this is Kathy Oren from our audience. She, first of all, she says, thank you for sharing your story. You are indeed an inspiration. Very interested to hear, what are the top supports that you believe colleges and universities can provide to help students succeed? So if you had to pick one of the 2 or 3 things, what would be your recommendation?
I think the top supports for me was the person that helped me pick my classes. So it was like, actually it was someone that kind of worked at my high school and in the college. So her name was Stovey. And she would sit down with me and she would talk to me about how are classes going? What classes are you going to take next semester? Are these classes interesting to you, type of thing? She even helped me pick some of the, one of my favorite classes was the anthropology class. I had no clue what anthropology was. She helped me pick that. So probably that person helping me pick classes and seeing a perspective. And then In terms of like what the school can offer, probably like a group, like I know a lot of schools are doing this already, like a group of students who have like similar backgrounds who can come together and just kind of, you know, have that, you know, camaraderie where, you know, we're all in this together type of thing.
Great, thank you. Sarah, this one I think is for you. How important, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but how important is it to reach out to stopped out students to hear their story, and how do we encourage them that they are welcome back to their institutions? What are you learning from the schools and the students you're talking to?
Yeah, it's very important. I'm going to steal Paul's phrase, which is to say, you know, I think the mentality that I would encourage all of us to have is that culture of care should be extended not just to active students and even alumni, but even your inactive students. We hear all the time from students at our partners how much they love hearing from their former institution. And it doesn't necessarily also make them immediately ready to go back, but they feel like they're being taken care of, and that the institution actually cares about what's been happening, even when they're no longer a current student. And that could have been, they might not have been a student for years. So believe it, one thing I would say is stop-outs love hearing from their former institution, and they really do feel like that means they're cared for. And I would also say getting them to tell their stories is important. And if you can engage your stopped out learners and provide them pathways to engage with coaches or faculty or advisors, first I would say make sure that you're really looking at your policies and your processes to ensure that there is a seamless pathway for your inactive students to get in touch with someone at your campus who can have that conversation. And once you get them on the phone or on email or now on Zoom perhaps or over text, ask questions to learn more about what they've been up to, what they want, what are their motivations. What we find is it doesn't take that much to get the students to open up and tell their story. They want to be heard. They still have this goal of earning a degree and credential, and they do want to talk about it. But I also think it's important for everyone to realize that just because students are talking about it and they still have this dream, it can take a long time to reprioritize your life and your finances to get school back on the priority list. And so it's a long-term investment that you're making in rebuilding that relationship.
Thank you. All right, we've got another one here that I think really could go for all of you. How do you assist students when they reach their walls and believe they can't afford or overall have the ability to complete their education? What is your Hail Mary sentence or resource? Maybe that's for Paul and Sarah, and then Chigo for you. You know, what kept you going when you hit a wall and felt like you couldn't do it anymore?
Wow.
Chigo, do you want to go first?
Oh, I should go first. Okay. So in my workplace, I work with a lot of other people that look like me. So I work with this lady, her name is Antoinette, and her name is Antoinette West, and she also is currently working on her master's degree while she's working, and she runs a whole work-based learning program. And then there's also Ezra Gatson. He has 2 kids, and he has his master's degree in business, and he's also running a work-based learning business. So every time I hit a wall and I think, wow, this sucks and this is really tough, I'll go and talk to those older guys or ladies, and I'll tell them this is what I'm going through. And they 9 times out of 10, they have like a story, I've done this before. You're never the first to do something is what I've realized, and their experiences are kind of what have kept me going. If they can do it, I can do it as well, type of thing.
Thank you. Paul, you were going to chime in there?
Yeah, I think there are times when we all feel like we hit a wall and perhaps there's nothing to do. But I'm reminded again of our ability to help students on their path and the importance of the work that we do. And we need to remind ourselves of what we do and how important it can be to get them a degree. And so a couple of years ago, I know my team was struggling to figure out a way to help out an international student who was facing a big financial bill that he could not pay. And we all struggled with what to do with this student. Anyway, we took it to my boss. That's what I do when I hit the wall. I take it to my boss, the provost and executive VP. What can we do? And it turned out he could provide some financial relief. And boy, I'm so grateful that we did. Turns out this student was homeless and living out of his car. And had we not intervened at that time, I don't know what would have happened to this student. And we told ourselves this story because it reassures us that the work we do makes a difference. And if I make a difference in the life of one student like we did in that case, I feel good for the rest of the year. And we have to tell ourselves that.
Sarah, anything you'd want to add there?
I think, well, we all need I need a lot of help all the time, whether or not I've hit the wall. Let's be clear. The recipe for success for me is similar to what everyone else has said. You know, one, have a team, build your support structure. It could be one person, it could be a group of people. But when times are tough for me, I need other humans to lift me up and to be a sounding board. And also the perspective that, you know, tomorrow is a new day. And that, you know, the pain or the, you know, the discouragement or the exhaustion, it is temporary, and you can always, when you're motivated and you feel like you ultimately, in my case anyway, I feel like I have a mission. I really want to be doing this work. I want to be helping learners who ultimately want to have this dream of earning their degree. And, you know, it's important to keep going on that no matter how tough or hard it gets.
I'm going to switch gears for a second, and we've got a question here. Probably Dave and Nicole, you can reflect back on some of the previous surveys. I think this is the $1 million question right now in higher ed, but we have a question here around, you know, based on the results of your survey, do you anticipate enrollments to rise nationally due to higher employment? Of course, when we see unemployment rise, we often see people return to higher ed. So I was curious what you've learned so far, and what do you think the complications of COVID, or do you think the complications of COVID will blunt enrollments in this downturn? So what have you seen? And I know we haven't covered that in this survey, but I know you've been looking into a lot of this, Nicole.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Obviously, if we could have all the answers, then we'd, you know, be even more highly sought after, I think, if we could predict for everyone. But I think some of what we saw earlier is relevant to this question, which is that even though people are very interested in education, they're not always looking to those traditional pathways like four-year colleges or community colleges. You know, this is obviously an unprecedented situation. People don't know how long they're going to be unemployed, and, you know, whether this is a temporary thing, whether they just need to go back and get something quick done while they're able to. So, and I think, you know, we've seen in other places that online enrollment is way up. We've seen some of our partners, you know, universities that we've worked with that offer online degrees have said that their enrollment is way up, and also from students who had previously stopped out, they're seeing a lot more of them come back right now. You know, that may be a special circumstance because online institutions that are established are in a particularly strong position right now when, you know, so many universities are trying to quickly adapt to that kind of teaching for the first time. So I don't think it's going to be a uniform up or down. I think, you know, it really depends on the format and the type of credentials offered is probably what I'd say our data has showed.
Nicole, I thought you were going to give us a number. Your crystal ball. It is perplexing. And if I may, just to look back at the broader brushstrokes, it's an analogous challenge that I've seen with other social impact goods, whether it's sustainable development or financial inclusion or volunteerism, where people believe in the long-term benefit. They have a commitment and a deep-seated value system that says education is good, volunteering is good, donating to disaster relief is good. The Red Cross, if we go back 19 years to 9/11, the Red Cross raised $1.1 billion in donations in response. and a crisis occurred because it came out that 200 million of that was going to go to long-term development response rather than immediate relief. And donors had felt like they were giving personally to help people in need because of their immediate impact in their lives. And since that, what we've seen in that industry is the rise in the designation of donor stipulated giving, right? And so, I'm giving for this program or this geography, and it happens in a widespread way. But it's that same confidence that Paul and Sarah were talking about, and that Chigo is illustrating, that I believe education's valuable. Do I know what job will be available to me on the back end, right? Is it worth the cost, and it will help me get the job that I want? That ambiguity or ambivalence we saw with the 50-50 split Nicole shared. And then in the middle of that is the personal part of, okay, if education's good, if the jobs are there, can I personally be successful in this program? And when we give people clarity into those paths and those connections and even immediate successes, that's why I think there are a number of questions coming through about, should traditional higher education institutions offer skills, certifications, immediate credentials? And I would say absolutely. The people who have success as students, as learners, who see an impact in their lives, that's not the end of their education experience. If they've had a taste of success, then they are more likely to want to come back for more. In fact, the least likely group we see nationally to say they need additional education are the some college no degree stopouts who've not had a success experience or recognize the benefit of completion of something. So if we can help people taste success and see what the immediate outcomes and impacts and opportunities are, that's just going to help them act on their desire and belief that education training will be valuable. And really, we can be partners with people. That's why people who want you to give time or money to donate or volunteer let you know exactly where it's going. And that's what we can do with education and in other kind of long-term. If I want to lose weight, I'm going to exercise more. If what am I going to do that's really going to get the result I seek? And people need clarity so that they can gear up for it and invest themselves. And then I think the other challenge is digital, right? This personalization of the hand on your back and the arm around your shoulder and the high five and the fist bump, you can do it. That we need that human touch to keep us going. At the same time, we're being pushed with social distancing and challenges to digital platforms. How do we still find the individual, find one another and connect each other? I'm grateful we're all here together today having a conversation. It's virtual, but I see faces and I see comments coming in, and it energizes me. And just think about others who are at different stages in their efforts and investment to move forward in their lives, and how we need to meet those needs. So just a little bit of broad, Jenna opened it up, but if you think of broad currents of what we're seeing from the public perspective, I think those are strong themes in my mind.
Yeah, great. Paul, quickly, I know we're going to wrap up here in a minute, but we have a question around, where can people find out more information about USF's Student Success Advocates and just your entire program? Is there a good spot on your website, or is there a paper you'd recommend we promote and send in through the chat?
Well, you can email me and I'll get you the information. Our advocates are doing great work, and they're happy to talk to other people about the work they're doing. I think that's the easiest way. pdosal@usf.edu.
Great, thank you. Let's see, I think we've got maybe time for one more question. I think I saw one here, just lost it. Well, let's close out with this for everyone. I'd say if there's one takeaway from today's data and from the conversation we've had that you want the audience to really remember, what would that be? And we'll do this rapid fire. Maybe Paul, we'll start with you. Go Paul, Sarah, Chigo, and then we'll wrap up our conversation.
I'm sorry, what did you want me to do? One word?
And then one final takeaway from the conversation today. What struck you the most?
What strikes me the most is really the need for all of us to rededicate ourselves to this work we're doing right now at this moment, despite all the challenges. Time to rededicate.
I would say let's consider holistic solutions for supporting students, and rather than look for a silver bullet to fix some of our systemic challenges.
I guess I would say that y'all have the power right now today to go and change some kid's life. Like if you really are about that, you know, helping kids and changing all that systemic stuff that you guys are talking about in your numbers, then you got to go down and actually meet these kids. Like if you have a degree, if you've been through college, you know, you can do that, you know, go and just talk to them. Your experience is what kind of changed my life. So yeah, that's kind of a call to action, I guess. Like, that's pretty much it.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. Chigo, Sarah, Paul, thank you guys for taking the time out of your days to share your own experiences and advice. Obviously, Nicole and Dave, the team is working tirelessly, plugging away at this data every week and trying to bring to this community just insights into what we're learning and what Americans really need from their education system. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks for a great discussion. The audience continues to be wonderfully engaged. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much.
Thanks.